Okay friends, we have made it to the fun part, and that is going into 3D. So for this assignment I'm going to start with my previously opened file because I'm going to base my 3D desk on my 2D desk project. I'm going to go back into my scenery layer. It should be where everything lives. It's going to take me a second to get there. Beautiful. And now I'm going to save as to create a new version, right? So we'll just leave it in the same folder, even though it's number 5. And we're going to call it Desk 3D Save. So now I have a safe, new, fresh copy. You'll be able to see it up here or actually in your resource bar. I have my resource manager over it, but over the top of that in the taskbar there is that file name. So I know that I'm in the right one and I'm not going to mess up my 2D version. Okay, so how do I now move into 3D? I'm going to give you a couple of orientation things about what 3D is doing. Some of you have discovered some of this already. So there are two ways to switch, well, there are 3 ways to switch between 3D modes, right? There's the one that we did when we were playing around with the Hunchback of Seville drawing with the previous drafting package, and that was we use Shift C. We use, I have to actually click on the thing. Yes. And that picks up the 3D flyover tool, the little spinny things, right? So that lets me sort of free rotate into various locations, okay? So that's my quick and dirty way when I'm working on a 3D model to just switch into a 3D mode from a 2D mode. I'll use Shift C. The other options are down here. There is now a little cube, a little boxy cube. So even when you're just in your, so I just hit X to get back to my pointer mode. Even when you're just in your pointer mode in your selection tool, you can grab and drag on this little 3D box, and that can be a quick way to move around in 3 dimensions. You can also very quickly, if you like grab to start moving it, you can click on any face and it will snap to that side, okay? Our drawing still exists. We can't see it very well, but it does still exist here. If I click and drag, I can see that's the side edge of it that is highlighted. So I do still have all that drawing information, even though I'm not looking at it right now. So I'm going to go back into my top view. The other place that you can see those things is over here, where you have top view, look at working plane, which is a super useful version, like view mode switch that they finally put back into the interface. So I'm glad that that's there now. And then any of these other versions. There is a small difference between top plan view and straight up top view. Top view, you'll see that your background got a little greener than it was in top plan. So when we get into our next assignment, we'll start working with elements that have that are like a 2D/3D symbol. And that means that there are separate attributes. There's like a separate view of it for the top view relative to what it looks like when you're just looking at the 3D model. So we'll see some of those later when we get into symbols, but that's the primary difference between top plan and top view, okay? The other thing to be aware of, right, is when you are in any of these views, yes, I knew, right, when I'm in any of these views, there are different options of perspectives that you can look at things. Typically, we're going to stay an orthogonal perspective, which is a pretty straightforward view mode. But when we are working on renderings, there are times when you might want to use a normal perspective, and now you're seeing, right, that there's a little bit of a receding into the background, right? A little bit of a skew that is based on perspective that has been added in. When you switch into that normal perspective, you're also going to start to see a sky and a ground. So that's just a way that you can keep an eye on where you are in terms of the perspective that you're looking at. But we're going to stay in orthogonal for now. I think that that's all we need to start, so I'm going to leave it there. I am going to go back into top plan view now because that's where I always want to start when I'm drafting something, is from a view where I know I am. And the keyboard shortcut to snap back into that view is Command 5. So if I hit Command 5, it's going to take me back into top plan view, which is a 2D version. we're going to now make our 3D desk, and I'm going to bring it over and just kind of work on it off here to the side. I'm going to start with my top, Command C, Command V. So now I have this top, but I've moved it kind of over to the side so that I can work on it separate from the existing drawing. So I just copy and pasted it over here. Again, that's Command C, Command V to copy paste. You can also Command D to duplicate, whatever makes you happy. Now I want to turn this into a 3D object, and to do that, I'm going to extrude it, right? So extrude is like the word for pushing pasta through a pasta maker to make something 3D, and we're going to do that to pop this up into the 3D space. I know that the thickness I want it to be, because ultimately I'd love for it to match this thing I've been drawing in 2D. So I look at the height there, that's 1.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and extrude this, and I'm going to make it a 1.5 inch thick tabletop. So now when I hit Shift C, like we have been doing, I have thickness. Beautiful. Amazing. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I want to set this tabletop up above all the other stuff, right? Because like I got this tabletop here, and it is sitting pretty well above the ground. We're going to leave our ground as 0. So I'm going to just grab a measurement, right? Or I can look at my handout in front of me that I have made. And it looks like it's going to be 2 foot 4.5 inches off the ground. That's to the bottom of the tabletop. So if I come over here and I say the bottom Z, so the height of the bottom surface of this tabletop, I'm going to just type in 2 foot 4.5 inches and hit enter. And now it is going to be floating up above, which is great because that's going to help me out. Okay. So next thing I'm going to make is this little frame that sits underneath it. Okay. So I know that it is sitting inside of my previous tabletop, and it's been a minute since I drafted that. So I don't know by how much, but it's an inch. Great. So I can now, and this is where it gets a little tricky because I already extruded this, create using the offset tool, right? I can't use the offset tool on a 3D object, only on a 2D object. So I'm going to go ahead and use the offset tool on this old version to create that interior frame piece, right? I also want to think about how thick it's going to be because I can maybe do my offset tool twice in a row. So let's see how thick this is. 3/4 of an inch. Okay. So I'm going to come up here. We're going to use this guy as my just like reference, right? I'm going to grab my offset tool. I'm going to go ahead and make it an inch inside. So that's going to create that shape, right? And then 3/4 of an inch. Okay, and that is going to make the one inside of that. Okay, so now I have these two pieces. I'm going to use my clip surface tool the way I have been all along. Delete. Now I have an open empty frame, okay, that I want to center into the middle of this piece. Centering it is a little tricky because it doesn't seem to have a center point. So I'm going to just snap it to a corner. Then I'm going to pick up my move command and I'm going to just move it an inch in the Y direction and minus an inch in the, an inch in the X direction, minus an inch in the Y direction. That will center that up underneath, okay? Or on top of, because right now it's only a 2D object. Then I'm going to extrude it, okay? And hold on, I don't know how big it is. One moment, let's come back over here and measure the thickness of this tabletop bit. 2 3/4 inches. Beautiful. So I'm going to extrude it that much. Command E for extrude. 2 3/4 inches. Okay. So if I hit my Shift C and I go into 3D mode, right? Now I have a table at the top and a frame way down at the bottom. I'm going to show a different way that I can manipulate these pieces. Okay, I'm also going to switch, I know I'm in shaded view right now, I'm going to switch back to wireframe view. And wireframe view just is quicker to render and it lets me see all of the lines of each object instead of only the ones that are the outside of it, right? So it's a little clearer for me. I'm going to snap to front view because I always want to be working almost as much as possible in one of these square views, right? I want to be square to the camera so that I don't move things around randomly and mess it up. So we're going to pick this up here from its center point. We're going to slide straight up. We're going to just let it snap underneath that tabletop, okay? And we're going to not show this dialog box anymore. We're going to see if that worked. And it did. It's centered. It's beautiful. Okay, I love that for us. Okay, so now we have that. That's great. I like it. I think it's good. Next thing I need, let's see. So I have these legs, right? I have this bottom framing piece, and then I have a leg on the other side. So it's kind of a U shape that I'm making out of the legs. So let's come in here, and we know we have a width of 2.5 inches, okay? We have a depth, and I'm going to look at my side view, of 1.25 inches. So I'm going to write those two numbers down so that I remember them. 2.5, 1.25. And now I'm going to make this first leg, okay? So let me take my rectangle tool. I'm going to just snap into this corner here, right? Tab over, my X is 2.5. My Y is going to be 1.25. And now, when I click, I have that leg, okay? I want that leg to go all the way up to the bottom of the tabletop. So it's actually fitting inside of that frame, okay? So I'm going to remind myself of that bottom Z, right? I'm actually going to Command C, copy that bottom Z dimension. So that's to the bottom of the tabletop. And then when I come back and click on my little leg here, I can Command E, extrude, and Control V in order to paste that height from my tabletop, from the bottom of my tabletop. Hit OK. And now when I'm in a 3D mode, I can see that that leg is going all the way up to the tabletop and it's sitting inside of that frame, which is exactly what I want it to be. I'm going to come back to my top plan view so that I'm working square to my camera again. I'm going to use my mirror tool to just like make some copies of this biz around this whole shape. Okay. If I'm holding my mirror tool, again, this is a thing where you can use Command to select multiple stuff. So if I have my mirror tool still on my cursor and I click, now I have both. Nope, I only have one. She lied. There we go. Shift and Command. Now I have both legs selected. I can grab that midpoint on the other side, and now I have all 4 legs going from the floor up into underneath that tabletop. Great. Beautiful. Okay, back to top plan view. So now I'm going to make this little side framing piece on the bottom, and I'm going to do that by just drawing a rectangle and extruding it the height of that material, and that is height of 1.25 inches. Okay, so I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to snap between those 2 corners, and then I'm going to extrude 1.25 inches. And that should create that bottom framing piece sitting on the ground and snapped between the 2 legs. And this I can also mirror across to my other side. Okay, great. All right, last piece. Well, no, almost last piece. Two more pieces to go. Okay, so we have our X shape. That's annoying. And we have this framing piece on the back. This is a little easier than the X, so let's do this first. So its height is 2 inches, so that's important information. We're going to go ahead and draw it just again as a rectangle in between those existing legs. Yeah, save it for sure. Extrude that 2 inches. Great. And then we want to find its bottom Z. So I need to figure out what measurement it is above the ground. And I can either look at my handout that I printed out, which was my previous drawing, or I can come in here and measure it, and it's 10 inches. Okay, great. So this should have a bottom Z of 10 inches. Okay, now the part you're going to hate, I got to make this X that goes in to the sides, right? I got to put that X into the legs, okay? Because I've already drafted this in 2D, I can just swipe my X from before, and that's what I'm gonna do. Okay? I know that the thickness of it should be the same dimension, pretty much, as the width between the 2 lines, right? I think that they're little square framing pieces. Oh, I know that the thickness should be the same as the dimension between the framing pieces. So if I come over here, I can measure that, and that's 3/4 of an inch. Great. So we're going to extrude this object. I'm going to Command C, Command V, make a copy of it so I don't lose my original. I'm going to extrude this object 3/4 of an inch. So now it is, dimensional. Okay, now it's dimensional. I eventually want it to be rotated twice from where it is, right? I want it to rotate this way, so I'm turning it this way and then I'm folding it up. So I'm first going to do that horizontal rotation while it's still flat on the ground. So I'm going to grab it from 2 fixed points from its bottom 2 corners and I'm going to just rotate it 90 degrees. Now I want to flip it up onto this edge. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to switch view modes. So I just hit my X key to get my cursor back. That didn't work though. Switch view modes, right? I'm going to come to the front view. And now I'm going to rotate it up this way. So I'm going to grab my rotate tool again. I'm going to pick up my object. I just held Command to do that. And let's see, rotate it up. And it'll snap at vertical. Perfect. Okay. So now, in theory, if I switch to the left view, and I can do it up here, or I can do it by dragging on the little box at the side. There it is. I can fit it in between those existing legs. Let's see what happens. Snap to the object. Okay, so it is close. It is not precisely perfect, and that's okay. We can reshape this really quickly just by grabbing any of these in the 2 points mode and just tweak, right? I can just grab this part here, I can reshape it to fit, and now it exactly precisely fits in between. The other option I could do would be to come in and center it up, and I can use the model version of clip surface, right, which is subtract solids in order to slice off that little end. But the quickest way is for me to grab this center point and just snap it to the inside of that leg. Let's see where we are. So we're still floating in space. That's not our favorite place. So it is now fit to that side, right? When I'm in the left view, it looks like it's in the right spot, but it is not in between the legs. So I'm going to go back into top plan view, right? And now I want to slide it over so that it's fitting in between these 2 legs. And I actually want to snap the top of this. I'm going to just quickly pull it over here and snap it to the center of that table leg. Okay, so now it's all perfectly snapped in. What a beautiful X part. Then I can mirror that across to the other side. Okay, let's look. We have a table. Okay, great. I love it. So now my table exists. Amazing. We can do similar, but not quite the same steps to export this onto the viewports for our PDF, okay? Your dimensioning step will be the same. There are slight differences in the rest of your export. This is also where, if you are someone who does too much, or you're ahead, this is where you could come in and add some of those bevels, right? You can add some of those details. So if you remember, we were looking at this desk originally, and there are some like beveled edges here, okay? There is a tool that lets you add that kind of a bevel to a 3D shape, and it's over here in the 3D modeling kit, right? This right here is your bevel, your taper face tool that adds bevels to stuff, right? Chamfer edge tool does a similar thing, right? So this is probably what you actually would want to use, is your chamfer edge tool, which will create that sort of diagonal edge. There's also a fillet edge tool, and that will make a little curve over, like a little round over bit on your router. So if you wanted to do chamfer edge, and you wanted to make it like a 1/2 inch chamfer, and you can then just select an edge like that, right? Let's say I wanted to select this front edge. I could select as many as I wanted. And I hit this, and now there's a little bevel, right, underneath on that piece. It's not perfect, but it's something. So if that's something that you feel like detail you want to add to make your 3D shape more 3D-able, go ahead. That's up to you. I'm going to not do that for the purposes of this. So now I want to turn this into a fresh plate, right? I'm going to put it on the same 8.5 by 11 sheet I was using before. I'm going to go ahead and just delete my previous desk because I don't need it anymore. I have made a 3D version, okay? Come back into my scenery layer, come back over to my desk, and now I'm going to create some new viewports. I'm going to come over here first and make a little box, and then view, create viewport. I do want to use it as the viewport crop, and I'm going to put it back over on my 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. I'm going to call this desktop. I'm going to bring it in at 1/2 inch scale, and instead of the original choice here, which is the view I'm already looking at it in, instead of wireframe, I'm going to use hidden line as my render setting. The view is going to be top. I'm going to say OK, and now it has created the desktop view. Okay, it's coming in with those orange lines. Remember those from the old viewports that you were looking at from before? So it's coming in with those orange lines. That's okay. We hit update. Now we're good. Now you can go in, edit your annotations, put in your dimensions. Okay? Let's do the same thing for the front view. So again, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to switch into the front view of my desk, and it looks very similar to the thing it was before. I am in the hidden line render mode now. Sure, re-render everything. That's fine. So I'm looking at only the surfaces in front of me. I am again going to draw a box. I'm drawing it on my screen plane, so we're good. And I go to View, Create Viewport, and I say, yeah, okay, I want to do that. This is going to be desk front. Same deal. Let's make it 1/2 inch scale. Okay, and now that front view is available. Okay, when I am laying out my plate, though just exactly the way I did before, I do want to snap my two views so that they are aligned. So I'm going to just snap that there and then move it 0 in the X direction minus, let's just say like 3 inches. Right, that's a little further down than it even wants to be, so I can now slide it back up. As long as I keep it in that same vertical alignment, I'm good. Now you can come back in again, and once you have updated it, it'll be easy. You'll be able to do all of your dimensions just as you did before. Last version is the side view. So I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to switch to right or left, doesn't matter, right? And I'm going to create viewport. So this time I did not draw a little rectangle so that you see what happens when I don't draw a little rectangle. This is desk side. I should spell that better. Again in 1/2 inch scale, again in hidden line rendering. Okay, so now I'm seeing that whole line of it looks like it's the floor, but what it actually is are all of the other pieces of drawing that we're not looking at for real. Right, so you can see there's like blue lines, those were dimensions and stuff, blah, 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 whatever. You can either delete that stuff so it's not there, or you can just crop this and we'll pretend that the floor is fine. And for the purposes of today's adventure, that is an okay solution, right? So we'll just go like that. We'll crop it. Uh-oh, we cropped it too closely, right? Because I lost the top of the table. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's okay. So there's that side view, and then I want to snap so that that floor remains the floor. Okay, so I want those to be aligned. I am going to also come in, clean up my annotations so that this is kind of lined up with its friend and centered underneath the side view. Okay. So lastly, we went to all the trouble of making this desk in 3D. So now I would love it if I had a little render over here to help my carpenter know what it is that we're doing. And so that'll be our last viewport that we create. I'm just go Shift C, right? I'm going to create a little 3D view in my Vectorworks, right? So I'm going to just kind of do something like that so that I have a little 3D view of what this should look like. And then I will again draw a rectangle around it as a crop. Nope, can't do it. It's not in the right spot, right? I'm on the floor plane instead of the screen plane, and that's a little bit tricky to, let's see, auto plane? Highlights the working plane, da 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 da. We'll come back to that. So we're going to just take this screenshot with our viewport tool, and crop it down again the way that we have been, because that's a little easier than getting into working planes right now. So this is a render view. We're going to leave this a little bit smaller just because renderings kind of come in bigger than they feel like they should be. So I'm going to make this 3/8 inch scale instead of 1/2 inch scale. So it's a slightly smaller scale. It's going to all come into that same plate, and it's left a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't need. I'm going to come through and crop the viewport now that it has been created to just show the desk. And then I will update its annotation to be underneath it. Render view. Oh, okay. Update. All right. So now I have a little 3D view of what this desk should look like in the end. Before you submit your file, you're going to come in and update your title block. Remember that. And then you're also going to add dimensions on those 3 sides of the desk. Okay? So once you have updated your dimensions and your title block, you can export this as a PDF and then submit both the PDF and your Vectorworks file to the assignment. Great, thanks. See you next time.